Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ross Melzer, and on behalf of Science Business, a very warm welcome to this webcasted conference, Balancing the Energy Economy. For those of you who are not familiar with Science Business, we are a media and communications company with a particular focus on EU research and innovation policy. Thank you to GE for supporting today's conference and allowing us to use this wonderful space where they have hosted GE garages for the past couple of months. And after the conference today, I would encourage you to wander around and look at some of the fascinating technologies on display. Technologies such as laser printing and 3D printing and laser cutting. Our conference today comprises of two panels. The first panel will look at the so-called energy trilemma. And if you're not familiar with the term energy trilemma, I can assure you you will be in about an hour from now. And then the second panel, we will go on to discuss the economics of energy. And we'll also look at infrastructure investments in the second panel. As this conference is webcasted, I'd like to remind you that it is on the record. We do have journalists in the room as well. So without any further ado, I pass the floor to Richard Hudson, the CEO and editor of Science Business, who will moderate the first panel. Rich.
Thank you very much, Ross. That's okay. Welcome. I should say for our audience who are watching online, we're on Twitter, and the hashtag is Energy Trilemma. There are two M's in trilemma, by the way, if you're trying to type it. We will be taking questions from our audience and from both in person and online. Now, for this first discussion to talk about this, we are joined by a diverse panel of experts. Immediately to my left and your right is Stefan Reimert. He is the president and CEO of GE Europe. Thank you very much for joining us, Stefan. And these are your premises here at the moment. So welcome. Thanks also for hosting. Welcome. Beside him is Tudor Constantinescu. He is senior principal advisor to the Director General for Energy. And so he brings the Commission's perspective into this discussion. With him, we're delighted to be joined by Bent Benson. He is a Danish member of the European Parliament, a member of the ITRE committee that deals with energy issues, among other things. And thank you for joining us to bring the perspective of the Parliament. And to keep us honest, we have an academic as well from the University of Cardiff. He is Philip Bowen. He's the director of the Cardiff School of Engineering. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and thank you as well. Now, let me just start off with this horrible word, trilemma. Bent, what is the energy trilemma?
I think if we are focusing on energy for the future for Europe, we have a trilemma. It's, for me, a question of our dependency of gas and oil. We are very dependent on gas from Russia and oil from the Middle East. It's, for me, also a question of security of supply. One of the things to solve this energy issue in Europe is, for me, to focus much more on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is the cheapest way to cut our CO2 emissions. I know we have a very, very split parliament. Also, the different parties in parliament are divided. We have a request from the east of Europe for more cheap energy. But what I think it's needed is that we focus much more on energy efficiency. Personally, I want binding targets for energy efficiency. Now we have a target from the head of states. But on the other hand, we also have to solve that in the European Parliament. We are focusing also to renew a lot of our power stations in Europe. And at the moment, the ETS system are not functioning because it's free of charge to pollute. I think the first region in the world which will become sustainable, will be among the winners. Therefore, more investment in research, development, also in new energy sources for the future. We have not to be so dependent on, if we can, for example, save up to 20% for the next decades, we could have more than 100 million euro inside the EU, where we could use it for much other things.
Okay. Right, but let's roll this back just a minute, Ben. The trilemma.
Yeah.
The word three. What are the three parts of it?
It is that of course there's an economic issue for all of us here.
Okay.
That's clear, but also a question of security of supply. It's a question of how can we solve all the new connections in Europe. I think we really need to see how we can get Europe to function much better with new grids, etc.
So we're looking for energy that is cheaper. You said the economic situation. We're looking for energy that is more secure, reliable. That's the second part. And we're looking for energy that's greener, I guess. It's more sustainable, to use the fancier term for it. And this is a concept that I guess has been spreading not just in Europe, but globally as well. So it's a problem. We're all trying to get, square a triangle, I guess you might call it. How? Now, you just mentioned energy efficiency. Let's talk about that a little bit further. You said this potential savings from energy efficiency would be how much again?
I think we can. I'm sorry to say so. I think still we have a lot of low-hanging fruits to save about 20% of our energy. I come from a country where we have doubled our GDP without using more energy.
Yeah.
Because we are the most overtaxed population in the whole EU, especially on the energy area. And therefore we really are forced to save more energy, and we have done that. And I think if we're looking for the future, we use about 40% of our energy of heating our houses. In the future, we will build houses. We are netto producers of energy. And also, are we looking at the building mass, the old building mass in Europe? There's a lot of potential for saving much more energy.
Okay. Stefan, does this make sense to you from an international industrial perspective? Can the kinds of gains that Ben is talking about be achieved?
Of course. I mean, we as General Electric just published a white paper in regards to efficiencies. And just give you a number, a real hard number. 1% of savings, when we talk about generation, is 15 billion in fuel cost savings in Europe. And that just shows you the magnitude of the game we play. But let me add something to the trilemma, because I believe, having some politicians here also on the panel, particularly our experience here in Europe and in Germany, where we, try to go an own way, not being very harmonized, unfortunately, with Europe. I think out of the trilemma, we are really in a situation where we have a force column. The trilemma is security, competitiveness, and climate change. The force column is that we have to convince you, meaning the population, that what we are doing, this energy transition, is the right thing to do, because it's not only a matter of technology. Of course, we as GE are a supplier of technology, and we are very interested to participate with innovation on that game. But it's more, because if we are losing the people who are making sure that you as politicians are putting the framework in place, we are losing the energy transition. And so it's a pretty critical game in which we are in, because when you raise energy cost, which we see at the moment, then you have people who are not very happy about it. And I think so the challenge is, and that's part of the dilemma, to do a transition, and while you're in transition, you make sure that you still have the most competitive, cost structure. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something which is heavily debated at the moment in Europe and in the country where I'm coming from, which is in this case Germany. And I think we lost a lot of people. And so I think we have to focus, and we have to do a lot of public work sessions like this today. And please feel all be invited here at the GE Garage. That's the thing we do for you. That's a platform where we want to build a dialogue. and and engage with each other, because if the population and the voters at the end of the day are lost on this transition, we have a fundamental problem.
Philip, could I come to you, because this is one of the things that you've been studying, right? Social attitudes and behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial, and I think the question you've raised there is an interesting one. I mean, where do you put the social element? Is it a fourth part, or what is a trilemma with four? Is it cross-cutting, or is it actually part of the affordability issue? Because that's very much a communication side. So I think it's crucially important that we, and for example, at Cardiff, we are trying to set up a research institute where we're trying to bring our social scientist colleagues in with us in terms of addressing problems in systems that come under the whole energy system, so that we get a public perception, we get a social input, we get a governance input, we get a business input. But it's challenging. I don't think it's probably been done on this sort of scale before.
Well, what does the research show? I mean, have you what are public attitudes towards the, I mean, are people willing to spend more to save?
Let me give you a bit of give you a few examples. If you've been involved in flooding, which quite often we do in the UK, then people sort of draw the link with climate change very readily and sort of make the link to finance. What's been found is that people who've experienced, have been flood victims, then have subsequently, it's not that surprising, but are very readily engaged in terms of energy saving issues and cost and all that sort of aspects of the energy.
So what, we need floods throughout Central Europe?
I mean, that's an extreme case, but it sort of gives you an example of one of the things that can provoke a response.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's important is people's attitudes towards security of supply. And the public perception, I'm sure not in this audience, is very much that is an attack on the sustainability agenda. Whereas I think people in this game see it just as a three-way tension, that has to be, it's more balanced. I don't think there's a solution to this. I think it's keeping the three elements in balance and in check so that you're not sort of...
So the things that do affect public opinion, and I don't know if you'd like to add to this in any way, are there's some kind of personal, there's some kind of catastrophe or something that brings people personally into the issue. Seems to be very important.
Yeah, I mean, that's one element, and I think, but also...
But is there anything you can do rationally about it?
I think the communication issue, we've hit the nail on the head earlier. I mean, we don't communicate enough I'm from an engineering school. We haven't cracked
Isn't this kind of boring to most people?
No,
I mean, honestly, how do you get them to talk about it?
Academics love it, It's just...
they love it in Brussels,
It's a whole new... I get to talk to journalists, I get to talk to social scientists, I get to talk to psychologists, It's... But I think also the critical issue here is, when you're discussing with the public, is putting choices against each other. You can't say, are you for this or for the other independently. You have to really look at choices. Would you, nuclear or coal? Or,
You're right, leadership is making choices. and ruling a country and being a politician is making choices. But I think the fundamental problem we have here is that we have two themes. The energy transition is a technology game.
Sure.
And I could add, well, we don't see a lot of technologists and engineers in that game. End of the quote. But on the other side, it's a generation task. It's a challenge which we as the population of Europe have generated in order to get into a more sustainable environment. And so there's two different messages. There's one very clear black and white, and you're an engineer like me, this works and doesn't work. And then you have the politicians who have to wrap that up and have to communicate that. And sometimes these messages are not go along. And I think it is very important that, we are getting a better messaging. And I think, we as GE are very humbled in this case by really promoting that and saying, well, at first we like to participate on it because we are technologists and we know technical solutions, which are every day, have to fight in a competitive market environment. And I think that's very good because that helps the competitiveness. But secondly, we like to get close to you in order to understand what is the overall framework? Because when you want to implement technology, then this technology will take time. And we like to educate how long it sometimes takes. And sometimes we have to all understand that there's one thing for sure, Europe lives in a very volatile environment. And that volatile environment going to stay. And so it's difficult for the political message as well as for technology and for the technology development to come to a coherent message.
Yeah, before I know the Commission has been the DG has been pushing very hard for energy efficiency. So tell, what are you trying to do?
Of course, now it's clear that there is no silver bullet in all this. Yeah, and there will not be one single solution. And energy efficiency is one of the solutions which we pay most attention because indeed it can help addressing the major challenges we have. Reduce import dependency, and based on our calculation, 1% increase in energy efficiency would reduce the gas imports with about 2.3%, for example.
Excuse me, can everybody hear him? Here, here, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, thank you. So 1% increase in energy efficiency would actually determine reduction in gas imports of 2.3%. Again, energy efficiency helps reducing the energy bills and addressing the issue of vulnerable consumers, which is a raising issue in Europe over the last coming years. It also helps reduction of CO2 emissions. So we have a range of multiple benefits, plus helps jobs creation, in particular in sectors like, for example, buildings, where we estimated that with the target we have for 2030 proposed now, we may reach additional 800,000 jobs in Europe. So all these are multiple benefits. But again, even this is not a silver bullet because the landscape became more complex. And speaking about the technologies and where these different solutions fit in, I think this is something which it's important from a technical point of view to understand that solutions which were not there some years ago now become viable. Distributed generation was a theory 20 years ago, it's becoming reality. Energy storage was not economic efficient, it is becoming economic efficient. Because of technological progress.
Okay.
Renewables, the capex of renewables decreased significantly. For wind, in the last 6 years, almost 30%. But the issue now is how to integrate these renewables into the energy systems, how to tackle the intermittent power issue. So the things have changed, and therefore we have a much more complex picture and the puzzle of 1,000 pieces to put together. It was simpler before. It was just a puzzle of 20 pieces when we had some forms of energy generation. Now we have a lot of other things to take into account, from distributed generation to all the other energy mixes, decarbonization, and smart grids to put together.
Is this issue yet politically important? That is to say, is any politician in any member state really going to get elected or defeated based on this issue?
I think it can be very, very difficult because we know we have this dilemma about cost effectiveness, and we have now seen a fall in the oil prices. We do not know about this will continue or it is steady. But I feel really that we need to go to the population and tell them this is a very, very big issue, because it's a question of also that our companies in Europe are becoming more competitive at the world market. So are we more efficient in European industries? I know it's difficult because we can take a business case. There's a lot of business cases where we can take one factory or a business out and say we have a business case here where you can have a payback in 3 to 4 years. But the problem is financing, because if they have the money to do it, they invest in other things. So this is a question also to the business people, but also to ordinary population. Because I think most people can understand this dilemma about climate changes, and also that our dependency on Mr. Putin, when we are speaking about gas for our European industry, and also fossil fuels from the Middle East. Do you know how the political climate is in Saudi Arabia in 10, 15 years? We do not know it. And therefore, we really, as Europeans, know to be more
reliant.
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, Tuda, you introduced this topic just a little bit. You were talking about the declining cost of technologies. So that makes me wonder, is the solution to all of this energy trilemma just technology? Do we just have to put more money into it? Can technology solve it? Stefan, can I begin with you?
I think you mentioned something which is worth. I think we are living in a very changing world, and that everybody's saying. But the key thing is we have to accelerate innovation, because the answer to most of these challenges are unfortunately innovation, and that speed has changed. And one of the problems we have at the moment, that politicians are giving us a framework, and they give a regulation, and the speed of technology is just superseding that. And we see that very often. Look at certain subsidy schemes we have. Instead of coming more back and saying, well, let the market play and take the subsidy away and put it into innovation. Because that's where the driver is. And that's where the strength is in Germany or in Europe or in the Western world. Because, we have to find answers. We don't have to build it always, but we have to find answers, and the answer is innovation. So I think we have to be more critical with the speed of innovation.
Okay. Ben, and then Philip. Go ahead, Ben.
I also think we have a loss of a competition about our single market. I was as a chairman for the negotiations in 2002 about liberalization of the energy market in Europe. And I found out that we have about 2 handful of energy companies who do not want competition. And are we looking at, they want to export their energy, but they do not want to get competition in their own market. And we have still not a single market for energy in Europe. We also need more grids. For example, if we want to implement all those windmills from the northern part of Europe down in Europe, then we are facing huge problems to get through. Nobody wants 400 kilowatt in their backyard. And that's also one of the problems we need to solve for the future.
Okay, Philip.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on the innovation theme, which I think is crucial to all this, and something that Europe has got a major strength in, allied to our universities. If you look at some of the experiences we have at universities, the European students are very innovative. Certainly British students are less inclined to be entrepreneurial. If you look at the Far Eastern students, then it's almost in reverse. Okay, so far more entrepreneurial in the Far East, and that's, I think, in Europe where we miss a trick. If we could convert our innovation, our natural embedded innovative minds and talent into commercial benefit in the energy sector, then you get wins across the spectrum. And
can technology fill the gap?
I think technology can indeed play a very important role, but as I said, there is no silver bullet. But what we have to pay more attention now compared to the past, I think, is the speed of developing technology to innovation and regulation. We always need a certain balance between the development of regulations and of technologies, because if regulations lag behind, we cannot deploy those technologies, we don't create the markets, we don't take advantage. If regulations goes too much in advance, then we distort the market and we don't take the most cost-effective solution. So we really need to find the right speed of developing regulations and technologies, and this is what we try to work on to a large extent. And on the other hand, let's face it, technologies is essential, but it's not all. And when we speak about concepts like energy union now, and our Vice President Sefcovic was launched on that, it's more also about solidarity and trust and the number of actions which goes behind technologies, but exploits the benefits technologies can bring in terms of innovation, in terms of transition to a low carbon economy, but also in terms of industrial policy and growth.
Okay. Let me add something to this. But we have to recognize that the biggest driver for volatility is the regulator. So having said that, I think, here we have a problem. And let me add, of course, as a technology company, we as GE believe that we can close the gap and that we do a lot of things very positively in development. But the major challenge today is at the moment not my competition. It is new business models of my clients and the change of my clients. So it's not only technology, it's also that the business model themselves is changing.
Yeah.
Look where the startups coming. We have a lot of startups who are, doing energy contracting in a completely different way. And so it's again, it's a bouquet of flowers which we have to address in appropriate manner. And I would love to see the regulator a little bit less than more.
But depends now what kind of regulator we speak about. I spoke in the broad sense of legislation and regulations, which allows the new technologies, the new business models to enter the markets, not putting a barriers which was put by the old regulation based just on incumbent technologies. So it's an evolution of the legislation which allows these new business models to materialize based on new technologies.
But wait, I'm being a little bit slow here. I mean, if you want to get more technology into the market, don't you just pump a lot more funding into research and development for it?
Of course, you need this first, and this is what we do also in the Horizon 2020. And we try to get also an integrated roadmap on technologies and an action plan to move this ahead.
Yeah.
So doubling also the budget for energy at least. But at the same time, and this is in line with the new business models you refer to, for example, you have excess wind at a certain moment, and you'll have more intermittent power in Germany. Maybe will be half of the electricity production by 2030. You'll need storage. You'll need maybe new technologies to exploit opportunities given by the gas networks, power to gas and injecting hydrogen and synthetic methane into the networks. When you have large scales, you need terawatt hours of renewables to store in order to avoid curtailment. So this kind of things requires new type of legislation and new things which to allow them to happen and not to be a barrier. In this way I was referring to.
Well, I think we're being a bit abstract here. Let's be more specific. In your own, what bets would you be placing? That is to say, which technologies are most important to solving this energy trilemma?
I think energy efficiency is first.
Okay.
So whatever is energy efficiency, we have to go for it. And I think a big step was made forward with
that means smart meters, better grid management.
energy efficiency means, first of all, handle the energy demand. Then it means what you say, smart meters, smart metering. Then it's renewables. First of all, also distributed generation. We have to adjust to take this into account and to inject renewables also into the transport sector. We see this trend of electricity more into the transport sector as well, but also not only to look of how to make use of all the chain of renewables and also of our other carbon-free sources in the economy.
Okay. Philip?
Yeah,
What's your bet?
I'd just like to add to that. I mean, you know, the injection of different gases into the gas network, for example, that also creates technology challenges because you've got to create your power at the back end with the variable fuels. And I think sometimes this gets, you know, with the likes of GE, sometimes these challenges get forgotten in light of the renewable agenda. It's all part of the same agenda. And I think that's part of the challenge I see in public communication, is that we're dealing with an energy system. It isn't renewables versus conventional or hydrocarbon. For the next 20 years, it is going to be system A versus system B. And I don't think we're there yet. I don't think in terms of communication, publication, journalism, I don't think we're talking that language. We're talking very much siloed.
We need to exploit more synergies between energy and transport policies, for example, between electricity and gas grids. So we need a more integrated approach where innovative technical solutions can actually help this happening, and in which consumers play a growing role, becoming eventually prosumers and make use of
Stefan, what's your bet?
I think, you know, when we talk about communication, we have to get rid of the scenario, one is bad and one is good. And at the moment, one is bad and one is good. And what we have to talk about is only the integration of both will solve for the next decades the solution. That's a fact. And then when you talk about bets, there are a couple of bets which we have to take. And we as GE take these bets. At first, when we talk about energy efficiency, you know, we are looking for the biggest bang for a buck. And that's a generation. If you save a couple of % on generation, you have a huge impact. And we develop new turbines and we develop new, very efficient power plants. But the second thing is, and it's not a trend anymore, it's even not a bet, is decentralized power generation. It's there. And it's there for good. And it's not that you can change technology. It will be there because it's efficient, it's economical, you have a payback time, it's aggressive, it's there, and it solves and it fits into the overall challenge. And last not least, and I think that's something which we all have to, and you mentioned partly, is the industrial internet. We have to talk about the industrial internet because it will open space. It will generate data in the amounts we never have seen before. I mean, on one turbine, when we just take it on one turbine, and you mentioned Twitter, if we look at the data on one turbine for one day, it's a multiple of the global amount of Twitter. So these data tell us a lot. And that's, again, efficiency, but we have to work with this. And I think, again, this is it has to be done together. You know, we have to do and work with these data in order to come with better and more efficient solution and be able to dispatch energy when it's needed. You know, we have enough energy. And we have enough energy in Europe. Some of the energy we wear between our ears because that's brain power and that's very important energy to solve the solution. But some of the energy, you know, we have excessively. And we have to do, you know, when it's best and when the demand is there. So I think, you know, we're living in a very challenging time and there's a broad, you know, possibility around us. And we have to be just open and we have to be a little bit better communicators.
Okay, Bent, your country made a very heavy bet on several things, but wind especially. So is that just peculiar to Denmark, or is that really the most probable safe bet if you're trying to solve the problem?
I think it's windy in the northern part of Europe, and therefore we have so many windmills. You have solar in the south, etc. I think it's really needed when we are speaking about the future that we take all the things we can find and have to develop them. One of the major problems, I hear that people do not like regulations, but at the moment we have an emission trading system who's really, I'm sorry to say, nearly crashed. We pay about €6 for ton CO2, and therefore we are facing to renew a lot of the power stations in Europe. First of all, we could not need to build all those power stations if we have more energy efficiency, so we can save a lot of money. On the other hand, they are built now for coal because that's the cheapest and it's free of charge to pollute. And therefore, we also now lose a lot of innovation in new technologies because the cheapest way at the moment, that's coal power stations. And therefore, I really think that we need to regulate for the future.
Well, but then, sorry, Stefan, but then this brings up the issue that both you and Tude referred to, the energy union. Tude, you said that we need to have coordinated, we had to take advantage of synergies between different parts of the system. Bent, you were talking about that you were involved in 2002 in trying to make an energy union. Well, will it ever happen? I mean, how would we know it's happening? It's been a gradual creep forward.
But let me address that for 1 second, because yes, you're right. We have at the moment a CO2 certificate system with 4 or 5 euro per CO2, which is not enough, maybe. But when you look at the data and you analyze it, and we as GE have analyzed this very detailed, you will find out that even at 40, 50, and 60 euro, it doesn't take local coal power plant out of the system. But it will take a lot of other plants out of the system in Europe. That's for sure. So I think we have to recognize that a country like Denmark has a beautiful solution with wind, because you live in a wind spot. Other countries don't have that. And what we have to make sure that the energy transition remains a transition, not an energy revolution where we kill industries. And if you go too drastical, for example, with a CO2 certificate environment where you go to 40, 50, and 60, I don't want to see the demonstrations down here on the streets, because they will be there. So we have to be very careful. What is good for one is bad for another one. So let's remain with very solid and nicely thought out steps. Some will work. It will work for Denmark. Some might not work for the rest of Western Europe, so to speak. So a little bit caution.
Okay, all right. But this energy union, how would we know it's happening?
I think we are forced to cooperate to solve the future about a new energy union. First of all, it's difficult to get energy from Spain to France, and what we see now, we see energy islands, our Baltic friends, pay nearly double as much for the gas compared to Germany. So we do not have a single market at the moment, and therefore I think we need to we need more cooperation about this area. Also,
But wait a minute, but why couldn't you get it in 2002? What was the main problem?
for example, when we speak about energy efficiency, no one of the energy producers in Europe like energy efficiency. On the end of the day, their turnover will fall and the surplus will be less. Therefore, why their business is to sell energy, not to save energy. And therefore, we had a major problem to get this unbundling, because some countries, they wanted to sell cheap energy, but it was very expensive to run inside in their own grids. So this is business. I'm sorry to say so. So we need a better single market for the future. It's also difficult for our Baltic friends to compete in the industry because they pay so much for the energy compared with others in Europe. So I'm sorry to say, we need all of us European. Also the Danes must pay to the grids so our friends in the Baltic area can be competitive.
Okay.
And why can't we get our energy from Spain to France and the other way? We need more
Philip,
grids.
what's it going to take to get more energy union?
Oh gosh, well the connectivity bit. I mean, I see that's a necessity. I mean, that sort of addresses one angle of the trilemma, doesn't it? I mean, that's your security issue.
But so far, I mean, you have every member state government asserting its own prerogatives. I mean, Germany, for instance, I mean, with the Energiewende, simply declared their policy and causing some consternation among neighbors. So the UK has its own policies that it's decided for itself on nuclear, for instance. So is there any way to get past these issues, these conflicts?
Well, I think we have to recognize that Europe.
Little interference.
No problem. Okay.
The Chancellor didn't like what I just said. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, she's still a very successful chancellor. But having said that, no, seriously, I think one thing we have to recognize politically, Europe has no programs which fits all of them. I think we are a very diverse structure, and Europe is Europe of the regions. And in these regions, we have different plays. And we have to understand that. And if you look at our Eastern European colleagues, I mean, at the moment, they're not talking about efficiency. They talk about, getting energy because they have energy growth. While, we in Europe, we don't have a growing energy place. We have a situation where efficiencies and new energy models are major challenges. So it's not the same in all the different countries. And I think that's one sign, that's a strength. I think, Europe has to think about the strengths of it. And the strengths of Europe is diversity. So I think, we as managers and you as politicians, we have to learn to live and manage complexity. And one fits all is going to be a little bit too easy and will not fly.
At this point, let me take a few questions from you. Yes, please, fast off the mark. Identify yourself, and microphone coming to you. And the next one we'll take from online. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Chris Smith representing Toshiba, and I was wondering, is there still a place for nuclear energy in Europe? You mentioned already the project in the UK. Does the panel think member states should invest in nuclear energy for the future?
I mean, I think I answered the question by saying, yeah, Europe is diversity. And yes, we have in UK nuclear power plants being on the plan. I can tell you out of the country I'm coming from, out of Germany, it is dead. It will be not there, and it will be not there forever, because the population, the society in Germany has voted against this, and that's the story. And it's a challenging story because by 2017, 2018 and 20, we take the last reactors out of the system, and we have to replace it with something. And we're on a good progress there, but it will be definitely not the extension of nuclear power.
Tudor, with the Commission's energy roadmap, what role does nuclear play in it if you look forward?
Actually, if we speak about the energy union and about the 5 pillars through which we were defined, one of them is decarbonization of energy mix. And when we speak about decarbonization of energy mix, the first is renewables. And to tackle the opportunities renewables offer in terms of energy security, in terms of domestic resources, and so on. But we also acknowledge that there are a number of countries where nuclear will continue to play a role, and it's right to continue to play a role, as it will be the case gradually towards 2030 with CCS, because if fossil fuels are going to stay in the energy system, it's clear that we also need CCS. But it's linked to the point I was making about balancing regulations and technologies. Technologies are not yet there at the point where we could ask to regulations that CCS is implemented for all new plants, for example. But maybe this will come.
Politically, I think that it's up to the single country to decide if they want nuclear power stations. I think for the future in Europe to get more dependent on energy from outside, we need a nuclear power station, we need shale gas, we need your renewables, we need energy efficiency, etc. And then we had to innovate of all those issues at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, this is, it's a big risk management game, and I think this is a perfect example of this. You know, you've got a choice of, you need baseload, you need coal. Well, do you take coal moving towards CCS, or do you take nuclear? Different risks. You know, you need to look at comparing those apples and pears in a risk management system.
Okay.
And
Let me take a question now from online. Microphone here, please. That's funny. People sent in their questions, and we still have to wait for the microphone to come by hand. Okay, all right. Florian Zubascu, what do you got?
Yeah, we have a question from Twitter. Can Europe ever speak with one voice on energy policy?
I think it's very, very difficult. We see it every time we have these discussions in Parliament, that the Parliament and also the head of states, they are very, very split. But what we need to speak with a more common voice for the future. Therefore, we need an energy union.
You have two commissioners.
Yeah, but the issue here is not to speak with one. Yeah, to speak with one voice. The issue is to have real common decisions, and I think this is important. We don't want now to close the voices. We need a diversity of voices, but in the end, what we want is that we all embark when there is a decision on that decision. When we speak to the rest of the world, we do speak with a common voice. I think this is the view on this.
As a non-politician, I think, you know, since we don't have one solution, you will have also not one voice. And I think that's absolutely okay.
Okay, all right. One last question, and then we move on to the next panel. I saw a lady back there, please. Please identify yourself.
Sorry. Emily Waterfield, a journalist with MLEX in Brussels. Question primarily for the MEP, but anyone else may want to reply. You talked about the energy islands in Europe and the lack of an internal energy market. We had a deadline for the end of last year to complete the internal energy market, which has obviously been missed. Do we need a new deadline, or will the energy union do the job? If we do need a deadline, what's realistic now? Thanks.
I have been in politics for many years, first as a minister in Denmark, also responsible for energy. We have been struggling with this for decades. I'm sorry to say, I think this will continue. And then we can speak about more deadlines. I think we are very divided, and we need to discuss, we need to find solution, we need compromises. That's needed for the future. I think it will become better, but we are still a long way in front of us.
Is there any comment on that? And then we close.
I think to a large extent, the actions which are now also foreseen under the energy union will help materialize this internal market fully functional at EU level. It needs to understand that we need to put not only the regulations together, but also the infrastructures have to be together, which to allow really the energy to flow and to take advantage from a region to another, from north to south and east to west.
Just a short comment. I hope that we can use some of the money we get in the investment packet on 350 billions for new grids and also to solve some of the solutions here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you to the audience and here and online. Next up is the next panel. So could the new panelists come up, and old panelists, thank you very much. And they'll mic you up. I reintroduce Ross Meltzer from Science Business. Ross, go ahead.
We just need a couple of minutes to change the microphone, so ladies and gentlemen, so you just stay seated, we won't be long. Thanks.
I don't know what I'm supposed to be.
there. At least that feels as if at least it's not going to fall off. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, we ready to start? Okay, sounds good. Okay, and well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our second panel is entitled The Economics of Energy. What is the cost effectiveness of energy and climate policies? And what are the key enablers and barriers to new infrastructure investments? We have a distinguished panel to discuss these issues. Starting with the Commission, we have Marie Donnelly, Director, Renewables, Research and Innovation, Energy Efficiency at DG Energy. Also from the Commission, but from DG ECFIN, we have Emmanuel Manson, who is the Head of Unit Economic Analysis of Energy, Transport, Climate Change and Cohesion Policy. Then we have Jep Kofod, Danish MEP from the S&D Group, and also, of course, a member of the ITRA Committee. And finally, as Rich said earlier, to keep us honest, from academia, we have Edgar Hertwich, who is Professor and Head of Department at the Department of Energy and Process Engineering Industrial Ecology Program. I hope I got all of that in. At the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So I've asked each of the panelists to start by giving some brief opening remarks, and I've asked 3 minutes maximum, and I will be strict with timing. And I'd like you to indicate what you believe are the most important issues or challenges when it comes to the energy economy or energy systems and indeed energy infrastructure. Marie, would you like to start?
Okay, in 3 minutes. I think the single biggest challenge that we have is energy security. Because once you have the energy, you can then decide what to do with it. So I think that's our number one issue. I think that we can deliver that in a number of ways. We can deliver it in a cost-effective way. Firstly, by overall, in an overarching sense, reducing our overall demand. So the first approach is to reduce how much we need. And the second approach is, of what we use, make sure it's sustainable. And in that context, we have a series of policies in place, including renewables, to ensure that we have sustainability. The security of supply comes from the lower volume and combined with the extent to which we use our own energy more than we do currently. A second element to that is to make sure that the energy flows in the most cost-effective way. And in that context, and you've already had some discussion on this, the interconnector policy that we're pursuing very actively at the moment is key. It makes absolute sense. You don't need even an academic study to tell you that if you have a larger market with economies of scale, it will be cheaper than having 28 individual markets, each working on their own. And in that context, it is clear that we need to go forward in an overarching sense, single market, working together, one, reducing demand, two, ensuring what we do use, we use sustainably and insofar as we can, our own.
Very succinct.
3 minutes.
Very succinct, thank you. Emmanuel, also from the Commission, DG ECFIN, we'd be interested to hear your thoughts, particularly on the regulatory environment, please.
Yeah, as I will try to respect the 3 minutes, but I would like to point out that compared to the to 2008, when the first package was designed, the energy and climate package, we are in a different economic situation, and it's important also to put in a broader context, because the economic situation is quite different. We have come through a huge financial and economic crisis. The recovery is still weak, but we need, and economists argue on the need to promote investment for growth and jobs. But the second issue, and it touches also about what has been discussed in the first panel, that we have now 5 years of implementation of energy and climate policy. And it's important to draw some lessons and also to build on this experience to go forward. And on this basis, I would like to make 3 quick remarks. And the first is that indeed investment is low in the economy, and it has dropped by around 15% compared to 2007. So we all agree that investment needs to be promoted in all sectors of the economy. But what is very specific to the energy sector is that beyond the economic case, we need investment to make this EU policy agenda happen. And according to some estimates made by our colleagues in DG Energy, that it's estimated that the needs amount to about 200 billions per year until 2030. So it's huge, much bigger than what we have done in the past. So that's important to be reminded. And that's my second point, is that most of this investment in energy will take place in the private sector compared to other sectors. And it's also important in that framework to be able to attract this investment and to make them happen. You might have heard about this task force on investment, which was set up at the end of last year, and which has identified about 2,000 projects worth 1.3 trillion. That's huge, including energy, but in other sectors. But at the same time, it was a task force chaired by EIB, Commission and Member States. And when some people or authorities or stakeholders were asked why this investment do not happen, there are many factors hindering investment. You have lack of funding, risk, uncertainties, or regulatory bottlenecks. And that's my third point, that it's not only a matter of funding investment, but to have the right regulatory framework. And many investors point to the importance of the predictability of a regulatory framework. That's indeed important, and that's a good step that member states could agree on the targets for 2030 in October to ensure this long-term framework, which is important for investors. But I would like also to highlight the need to have it also implemented at national level. And in the past, recent experience have shown that during the crisis, because some forms of state interventions could be harmful, be it price regulation or generous support schemes to renewable, which has required the revision of this policy in member states, creating this climate of uncertainties, which is being challenged sometimes by investors. So having cost-effective policies also is a guarantee for the long-term sustainability of these policies, and which creates a positive environment for investment. I will stop there.
Okay, we'll come back to some of the points that you both raised. Before we go to Yep, I'd like to ask you both from the Commission to just give one example of how your respective DGs have been working together and cooperating in energy policy. And this cooperation across DGs is of course, a priority for President Juncker. Marie?
Well, as you know, the Commission has, since its foundation, operated on the basis of a collegial approach to the development of policies and its proposals. And I think actually one of the biggest strengths that we have in our operational system is what we call the inter-service consultation, whereby any document before it goes to the college goes through what we call an inter-service consultation, where all of the other DGs have the opportunity to comment. We usually have a meeting, make remarks and whatever. And I think that reflects, it's like an advance run of what we're likely to encounter when we leave the Commission, because of course the Commission, through its various services, bring together the diverse views. And I think that's a real strength of our structure and our cooperation. As we go forward, we have, as you know, a new structure for the Commission now, which will further reinforce that. And the kind of areas that we are working on is what we call in families, where we have put themes into families and we work with the other DGs in those areas. And if I take one specific area, as you know, at the Heads of Government meeting in October last year, they've asked the Commission to look at the whole policy of transport. And transport is a policy area that stretches across a number of DGs. So clearly DG Move, naturally enough. Ourselves on the energy side, DG Klima on clean cars and other initiatives, DG Grow because they have the Car 21 initiatives, DG Agri because for biofuels they're very heavily involved, and DG Research because that's where we're getting a lot of the innovation coming through. And that's before you get to things like DG Trade for the international trade side and everything. So that just, if you just take that dossier alone, you can see how the various parts of the Commission interact in terms of each bringing what it is they can to the policy in order to get a holistic policy prepared.
Okay. Emmanuel, an example from DG ECFIN?
I just mentioned the crisis and when we have come through this big crisis, and as an example in DG ECFIN when we had to work with some member states and the so-called troika or adjustment programs, where in some cases the energy sector was in distress because of bad performance of state-owned enterprise, bearing on public finance and requiring some actions. So typically on these issues, we work closely with DGNR to ensure the reforms, the right reforms.
Yeah, like Bernd in the first panel, I know you have some interesting insights from your own country, Denmark. Please.
No, well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to say that for me, the biggest challenge when it comes to looking at energy in EU is to break down kind of 28 national energy ministries and regulatory authorities that kind of protect their own interest and also energy companies in their own countries. I think that's really a challenge, and if you, as I was serving in the national parliament before, now I serve in the European Parliament, see that still it's very hard to integrate. And I fear, actually, one of my biggest fears is also that now we have the 2030 package, we have the energy union coming up and concrete proposals, but still do we have this convergence, or will we still see that there will be 28 different policies at the end of the day? So that's my biggest fear. In Denmark, I mean, of course, it shouldn't be a Danish discussion today, but still, I mean, the oil crisis in the 70s, made the big transition. From the reliance on fossil fuel, and now, of course, put a lot of investment into wind. And I have to say that it is possible, and I also think that as you increase the share of renewables, which is very important, then you also really need the grid integration. It goes hand in hand, and there I'm a little concerned about how it goes in Europe. In Denmark, we had 2014 the record high share in electricity of wind, 39.1%. In January last year, last year, we had more than 60% of our electricity generated from wind. So it's possible to increase, and it's important to say it's a strategical, geopolitical, secure resource, and that's also some we have to take into account. I mean, we spend 400 billion a year in Europe importing energy from Russia and the Middle East and other places. One fifth of our imports. I mean, should we not invest this money in Europe, create jobs? When we talk about the grid and investment in grid, I hear very often it's costly, but actually it's also an opportunity to create jobs. I mean, we have to have somebody building these grids throughout Europe. So it's also an opportunity for us in a situation where we have so many unemployed people. So what I see in Denmark, of course it's a painful process. Bent, he alluded to it. I mean, Danish citizens, they are heavily taxed when it comes to energy, and they're very angry about this. But the benefits to the country, to the industry, to the consumers is high. I think one example, the best example I can give is in industry, we have the lowest energy input of production, I think, in the world of any country. So what we use of energy to produce one unit that create value, it's the lowest input in Denmark because we have this energy efficiency and also energy transition in mind. And why not do that in the rest of Europe? In that respect, I'm really concerned, I have to say also, when you look at China, they have now set very ambitious target for 2030. For example, 20% of their energy mix should be carbon neutral. Of course, they can build a lot of nuclear power plants, but they can also build a lot of wind farms, and they can invest in solar energy. And And I fear that many of the innovation and research that we were leading in Europe is now shifting to Asia, for example, or to the US. So in my opinion, we should really take a bigger step. I think we are too unambitious so far in Europe, and I fear that 28 countries will hold back what we need to do if we really want to be ambitious.
Okay. Did Denmark continue to invest heavily throughout the crises?
Yes, but actually I think what is more interesting is that the industry that grew even through the worst year of the crisis from 2008 and 9 until now were the energy technology industry. It grew even though rest of industry lost jobs, massive amount of jobs. So there's also building up a new industrial base here. I mean, you can actually do that with these type of technologies. And we're talking about reindustrializing Europe again, up to 20% in 2020. And there, I mean, this is an opportunity for us. Why not be leading in the world, or continue to be leading in the world in energy technology? All kind of energy technology, energy efficiency, renewables, grids, and also the software. And there, I think other people mentioned this. I think also we have to integrate it into social sciences, into thinking how we can make consumers more powerful when it comes to energy choices.
Right. Edgar, I know you presented to the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it was on the co-benefits of climate change mitigation. So perhaps in your opening statement you could touch on some of that presentation.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to remind ourselves that energy has a lot of benefits, and we have access in Europe to abundant and reliable energy at reasonable financial costs. Actually, the financial costs are a lot lower than the economic benefits that we receive both as households and as industry. Of course, we would like to keep that access. But there is a cost that is not implicit in the financial costs that we are paying, and those are the environmental costs. A few years ago, I did a study together with a quite large group of scientists on looking at the total environmental harm that is being done and trying to understand the causes and drivers of that harm. And we looked, and what we found is actually that fossil fuels were the #1 problem in terms of the environment. They were not only causing climate change, they were also causing damages to health and to ecosystems. And that is really the background for and the need for the energy transition that we look at. And if we look at renewable energy, for example, it has significant environmental benefits in terms of being a source of power that can deliver power at environmental costs much lower than fossil fuels. But these costs are lower, but they're not zero. And that's really the trick with energy efficiency, right? Here, we don't want to produce more power than we really need to. And I think that's quite important. And so we need to be aware that we can reap a number of benefits from going from a fossil-based system to a renewable system and maybe also to a partly nuclear-based system. The transmission lines have been mentioned. I think it's very important to be aware that a lot of renewable sources are intermittent, and therefore we need to deal with that. We want to have power the whole day around. And that means that we can transmit the power over longer distances and share the variability and even it out across Europe. But there are also other solutions to this problem. There are solutions in terms of power storage. There are solutions in terms of timing the demand. We can store energy also in the form of heat. We can produce gas from it, as was mentioned in the last panel. And I think there will be a package of solutions. We don't know yet which technology will win and how much transmission we really need, but we definitely need more than we have today. So I'm glad to hear that the Commission is planning to remove some of those bottlenecks. Of course, right now in Europe, we are in a situation where maybe we're paying more for the energy transition that we need to. And I think one of the main reasons for these high costs are actually the volatility, as was mentioned in the last panel, that is induced by policies, the low price for the emission trading system, the low carbon price. So if we could actually have a more stable environmental cost that is imposed on the energy, that would make introducing solutions cheaper. And if there's an investment need of 200 billion euros, reducing the political risk on the financing by 1%, right? That saves us 2 billion euros per year. And that's quite a lot. So I think that will make the investments more readily forthcoming.
Okay, we'll come back to energy transition in a moment. But Marie, I'd like to ask you a specific question on energy services. What kind of energy services do you think European citizens want? And perhaps most importantly, can they be provided sustainably?
Well, I thank you for that question, because this is one of my favorite hobby horses about energy. So, what do we use energy for? We use energy for 3 services. We use it for heating and cooling of space, 46% of our energy. We use it for mobility, either individually or economics, 33% of our energy. And we use it for power. My colleagues say I should call it electricity. In any event, turn on the lights, the computers, 21%. And I say this again and again and again because so much of the debate in the energy space tends to focus on the third issue and really not enough on the first. So when you talk about citizens, you, me, people in the audience, and industry and economy, the first area that we have to look at is heating and cooling. And the opportunities that exist in the heating and cooling space are enormous. We can reduce, this is where we can really seriously impact on demand. We can reduce demand in the heating and cooling space enormously with a series of measures which are cost effective, which are good for the economy, and which provide jobs, and which lead to a better and more comfortable environment for all of us. So it really has to be the number one area for all of our activities and our services, heating and cooling. There are challenges, I can discuss those again. In the area of transport, we've had a number of policies in place in transport up until now. We still have a persistently high level of greenhouse gas emissions coming out of our transport sector. It is a challenge. It is a challenge to get it right. There are a number of policy measures that we can take in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. But the message we get again and again from the analysis is that, one, our economy needs mobility. So we need to be able to transport goods, etc., whatever. And we as citizens like mobility. So whatever policy measures we come up with, we're probably not going to reduce the volume of mobility like the volume of heat. We have to cope with how we can ensure that as a service that doesn't cause difficulty to our environment. And in the power sector, we have a lot of efficiencies that we can gain. We can gain through scaling up through the interconnectors across the member states. We can scale up through smart grids, smart meters, smart homes, and we can be very smart in an area that really has only started to emerge in the debate now, and that is in terms of negative electrons. We all understand that you pay for the positive electrons that come in to turn on the light switch. We still haven't internalized and understood and put into practice the fact that not using an electron is as valuable to the energy system as using it. And so the whole question of demand response is an issue that I think we really have to take on board much more seriously than we have up until now, because it can deliver huge savings for us. And I just give you two figures, or two illustrations. We heard about Denmark and the wind in Denmark. And if you look at Denmark as an island, its location and its population, and you look at Ireland as an island, its location, its population, both of them are pursuing a wind strategy in terms of renewables. It costs Ireland at least twice as much as it costs Denmark. Why? Denmark has 68% interconnections with its neighbours. Ireland has 3%. So Ireland has to do its own backup on the island because it cannot balance with its neighbours. So that's a really visible illustration of a side-by-side comparison of the issues. Demand response, all member states have installed capacity higher than their peak demand. It's the normal prudent thing. Your demand is X, your peak demand is X, so you go 10%, maybe 15% more in your capacity, just to be sure, which means we have excess capacity in Europe. Peak demand in Germany last year lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes. And we build our capacity in excess of peak for 8 minutes. So, you know, the easy wins are there if we're prepared to take the measures that will allow us to get the benefits. And I think we have to be very ruthless in looking at what are the cost-effective measures that we can take, some of which are behavioral, and some of which are technology-based, and some of which, a lot of which, are based on cooperation. And these are the opportunities. This is what makes the economics of the energy system work.
Just following on from that, what is the business case for energy efficiency? Is it good? What do you think the quick wins are?
Well, I think also Mary alluded to it. I mean, when it comes to buildings, I mean, it's really, it's up there, and I mean, the business case is good. I mean, you do some improvements on buildings, you will have a business case with return of your investment in 2 to 3 years, something like that, or even less. So, and we should, of course, I think we should support heavily and find ways to incentivizing people to do this about buildings. But also local district heating systems is something we have to look at. I mean, one of the ways of improving efficiency in Denmark is district heating systems. And then you are sometimes put the question, but well, Denmark is cold and, you know, rest of Europe is warm, but it's not the case actually. There have been studies on that, and you can really have a really high improvement of energy efficiency if you deployed district heating systems across Europe. Really, that's something we could do. It requires huge investment. We have the Juncker plan. We have also other vehicles for investment. I was shadow in the S&D group on the long-term investment fund, which is another structure where we can allocate money into the real economy and try to find suitable infrastructure investment in energy. So I think we should look at buildings first and foremost. And then I think also the grids, as I said, is so important to integrate the grids. One example from Denmark, in 2012, we have an excess of wind energy. We could export it to Germany if we were allowed, but we were not allowed because they have an internal problem in Germany with their grid from north to south. So they cost 500 million Danish kroner that we could not export our wind energy. And the problem is we could not solve it between the two countries. It's an internal German problem, but it's actually a European problem. So I also hope that the Commission will look not only across borders, but also internally, that there are internal in countries problems, bottlenecks that affect a real efficient energy system in Europe.
Okay. I just want to come back to energy transition, Emmanuel. Is there a danger in the years and decades to come that the EU could be seen simply as a pioneer of energy transition, but they won't have actually delivered any industrial leadership? And this is something that you touched on, Jep and Edgar, in your opening remarks. I mean, can the EU still win that industrial leadership race, or is it going to be China and the US?
Last year, we looked at the performance of the EU in terms of renewable equipment, and we could see that Europe had, and thanks greatly to Denmark, that Europe had a competitive advantage on renewable equipment in wind. Not so much in solar panel, but in wind, it was the strength of Europe. So the advantage are there, and let's hope that they would continue. I just would like to come back also to the importance of having the right policy design and cost effectiveness of policies, because this will also be important to keep the edge in the competitive international competitiveness. Last year we looked at the situations of the so-called what we call electricity tariff deficit in a country, which has to be paid. and because it was a crucial problem in Spain. In 2007, 4 countries had a tariff deficit. In 2012, 11 countries. And it bears, as I mentioned earlier, on financial performance of companies or on public finance. So typically this has to be removed, paid, or the policy has to be redesigned. That's also important because it was also in the renewable, and if you want to keep this competitive edge or investment, it's important to have this policy designed.
That's one of the challenges of financing and energy and climate policy today in times of austerity, because it was actually decided upon some 10 years ago, right?
The austerity?
No, the energy and climate policies.
Yeah, but some countries do not have, if you quote some Nordic countries, they do not have a tariff deficit. So after you have the framework at the EU level and the way you implement it. And that's maybe when I mentioned the need to draw some lessons from the past experience, it's really important to look at what has been done and the success stories, the best practice, and what needs to be improved in the future. That's where we can benefit compared to the previous year.
Let's just stay on funding and policy for a second. This is a sector that's accustomed to long-term investment cycles and stable policy framework. What are the risks that there are some parts, particularly of the electricity sector, becoming uninvestable?
Well, I think you have to divide the electricity sector into 2 parts in terms of investment. You have what we call regulated assets, and you have unregulated assets. And for regulated assets, it's a long-term investment that's effectively guaranteed by the regulator. Whether the tariff is right or wrong, you can argue, but effectively at the point of investment, it is governed by a regulated structure and it is secure. It is why the rates of return are lower and should be lower, because it's a long-term investment with a guaranteed return. The area where perhaps it is more exposed is, of course, the non-regulated assets. And the non-regulated assets primarily occur in the generation side. I mean, there are some interconnectors which are merchant lines where they're not regulated assets, but it's primarily in the generation side that this occurs. And it's there that the investment risk occurs because you don't have any floor, you don't have any coverage. And we have seen that, for example, if you look at gas CCGT investments in Europe, which are operating at maybe 1,000 or 2,000 hours a year, those investments are not making any profit. They're not even covering their costs. So yes, it is a challenge to get the generation side of the business right. And in that context, that's where the policy becomes hugely important, because that is in large measure what steers the direction of investment. And from the analysis we've done, we have seen that over the last, say, 3 to 4 years, 80% of investment in generation has been in the area of renewables. And this is, of course, as a response to policy structures. We still need investment in some other areas, that's quite clear. But, as I say, 80% of it has been in the area of renewables. Part of the challenge, of course, is that because of the economic crisis, our demand profile has been at best static. And the displacement effect of investment in renewables vis-a-vis other investments has perhaps been much more pronounced than would have been the case if we had had a normal market situation with normal levels of dynamic growth. So certainly that's an issue, and that has been an issue in our energy system in Europe today. But moving forward, I think it's fair to say that now that the heads of government have confirmed the path that we're on, that it sends the investment signals to the investment community and points to where the investment needs to go in, certainly the generation side going forward.
Edgar, which infrastructure projects do you think have been the most successful to date? And with those projects, do you think the public has actually been on side?
Well, I think examples of projects that have been successful are, of course, the sea cables that we are building from Norway to the Netherlands and to Germany and planning to Great Britain. And I think this is an area that is not very controversial, as nobody lives on the sea, and so it's much easier to build transmission lines there. But on the other hand, I also would like to point actually to the development of renewables in Europe, where Europe really has taken a lead globally and has kick-started the wind and solar sectors, and the other continents have followed up, right? And even if the Chinese are taking now the lead, they wouldn't have taken the lead without us taking the first step and really bringing the initial costs down. And I think this opens up really a great array of opportunities. And who knows, maybe we are in for a similar revolution in energy storage, for example. And that could really be a game changer, I think. And the same thing is with demand response, of course. And I volunteer my freezer to cover some of those eight hours a year of the peak. And so maybe actually I think it would be nice if we saw some of these revolutions that involve the citizens more, where I can do something in my house that actually is part of the solution. I think people really want to be part of the solution. And of course, the renovations of the buildings is much more important than volunteering your freezer to shut down during 8 hours of peak demand. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do in that direction.
Okay. I see from my colleague that we have a Twitter question, and we've got just over 5 minutes left, so I will come to the audience in a second. I see a couple of hands, but can we take the online question first, Florent?
Yes. So our question from Twitter is, how do we become less reliant on Russian gas?
Okay, we touched on that in the first panel, but just very briefly, are we too reliant on a single source, Marie?
Well, yes, indeed we are. We did a paper, as you know, last May on this whole issue of security of supply, and we identified that for 7 of the member states, they have a single supplier of gas. In some instances, that represents 100% of their gas supply. So yes, we do have a vulnerability, we do have an exposure, and we do have to think of measures to deal with that. And we are very actively pursuing those measures. Clearly, one is to diversify the source of supply. That might be through additional piping possibilities and or both maybe through LNG, increased LNG terminals. But we also have a very real opportunity now in terms of reducing our gas need. And this is where, if we looked at the gas, we found that 61% of the gas that we're taking in from Russia is used for heating. So this is really where the heating opportunity comes in. I mean, if we can move heating out of gas into renewables in the form of, let's say, locally grown energy crops, biomass, solid biomass, and or heat pumps using renewable electricity, which supplies the energy. This allows us to disconnect from a single supplier and at the same time become renewable. And we have seen illustrations of this happen, in towns and communities in member states, and the economics are very, very positive. The local economics are really very positive. These are primarily areas where district heating is in place. So it's, we have 11 or 12 member states where district heating is quite common. So it's a real opportunity in the district heating space.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to go to the audience now. There were 2 questions in the second row, so if I can group those questions, please. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Jonathan Rattler from the University of Birmingham. For sure, we need a lot of investment for the energy transition to take place. But given the nature of the technologies and the systems that we've been talking about, these seem to go somewhat against the current business models of the actors who would expect to put in that sort of investment. So who's going to come forward and provide the billions of euros that can enable that? Think about the energy supply industry. Their business is around selling more electrons, as we've heard, at large scale. We might be moving towards more efficiency in selling services at a more local level. So we might have to completely rethink the regulation of the industry to bring forward the new investment.
Okay, thank you. And take this question as well, please.
My name is Petson Panuns. I'm the head of the Eureka Secretariat, and I was a predecessor of Maria in the European Commission. My question is quite simple. the real single major innovation that changed completely the energy scene, it was the shale revolution going on the United States that is ensuring half of the price for power and 1/3 for gas. So how can we cope with this situation if we are insisting in a model that was like a picking winner that really is costing a lot, much more than was anticipated, and these tariff deficits represent in my country and in Spain 3% of GDP and growing. So shouldn't we review completely what was our energy policy?
Okay, yeah, who's going to finance it? First question.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's, as also others said, it's important to have private investors in there. And in order to have that, we need framework where, like we have the investment package from the Commission, 215 billion. Sorry, something wrong here. No. Okay, where public money can pave the way also for private investment. We need to have a new way of collaborating, because it's true that we don't have a lot of public money to put into this. So we need ways to do that, and the Commission is working on that, and I hope that they will be successful on that. Might I just say on the other question, because I think it's very interesting, on the unconventional gas and oil revolution that we have seen in US and Canada, shale gas, oil. I think it's fair to say that well, in the very short term, it has provided a lot of benefits to the US in particular. For energy prices has gone down, and but if you look at medium and longer term, I think still they need to do their transitions as well, especially if you take into account the environmental cost, the climate cost. I mean, you still have gas, you still have oil, fossil fuels in the energy mix. So it's not a solution for Europe, I think, to invest heavily in shale gas or similar things. Because also, I mean, also this discussed a lot, but in Europe it's not the same. We don't have the vast majority of land where nobody lives, and we can do this kind of drilling. And I think really we have to take into account the environmental and climate cost. And then I think we have to. I mean, I fear that the transition, the shift in our energy system, should not only be a shift away from Russian gas and Middle Eastern oil, it should also be away from fossil fuel. But I think there we have the real disagreement within European Parliament and within European countries. If we choose to rely on renewables, energy efficiency, real integrated energy systems, and new technology, I think we can actually solve the problem. And now I come from Denmark, and we have also very, very bright universities dealing with this issue. And it's a little bit of a myth that we need a lot of fossil fuel into the energy system to ensure energy supply. We can do it other ways if we think more creatively. I think maybe I can ask also.
Manuel, you wanted to add something.
Yes. Just on the issue of shale gas, that you're right that it brought lots of benefits in the US. But last year we looked at this in Europe, and to look at the impact on EU manufacturing and the performance, and to see whether it was a problem. Of course, we have an overview, and we don't have company. We don't look at company level or some subsectors. So, but at least I don't know if it's a good news or not. But our energy policy have induced higher energy price in Europe compared to the US. But the good news is that the energy efficiency performance of manufacturing are far better than the energy efficiency performance of the US. So if you compare, and that's what you would do, I always compare with when we talk about labor cost and labor productivity. You would compare low wages with low wage countries, but you would look at labor productivity and how. And if you do the same with energy, and you look at the energy price or the cost that is paid, that indeed is much higher in Europe. But if you look at the energy productivity performance of our industrial sector compared to the energy productivity performance of the US, Europe does better. it might not. We have to be careful. We don't. I don't mean that we need to be complacent and to say, okay, everything is good, but at the same time, we have to be very careful, because if we compare what we call the unit energy cost, as we would do for unit labor costs, Europe, in terms of level, the evolution is comparable between Europe, China, Japan, or the US. However, we have to be aware that this energy efficiency performance, the US or China, they will catch up. And we need also to look at what is happening in Europe in terms of energy price developments. But at the same time, we need also to put in the right context the US shale gas story, at least now, not in the longer term, but in the short term.
Thank you, Edgar. I will give you the last word in a second, being the only non-policy maker on the panel. But I'd like to conclude by quoting the headline from this week's Economist, "Seize the Day, how falling oil prices and new technology offer a chance to transform energy policy." And they go on to say in the lead article that the fall in the price of oil and gas provides a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fix bad energy policies. Now, that's a bit controversial, the bad energy policies, but in a word, from the policymakers first, is this a once-in-a-generation opportunity? Marie?
Well, I hope it's not a once-in-a-generation opportunity, because I hope we might have low oil prices going forward, which means that the opportunity would remain. The current change in oil price, and I put some emphasis on that, because trying to predict the price of oil is a fool's game. We've done scenarios for 2020, we've done scenarios for 2030, and if any of our modelers had suggested modeling the price at $45 a barrel, we'd have locked them up, frankly. So, I mean, I think we just have to realize that it's a very volatile market. It's going to go up and down. It'll stabilize here or it'll stabilize there, and it'll probably react to various things. I mean, there are lots of things that can cause it to change. And I think our policy has to be much more stable than the price of the barrel of oil. I think the low price today offers a real opportunity on the international scene, including for Europe, as identified by the International Energy Agency. It's the opportunity to remove subsidies for fossil fuels in the marketplace. They should be gone, out, gone, disappeared. And once they're gone, they're gone. I mean, that's the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, is to take away the financial supports for fossil fuels, because now is the opportunity to do that. And that certainly is one element that should be taken. But I don't think we can build our policy on the gyrations of the barrel of oil. And I also have to say that, in the context of the energy system in Europe, the change in the value of oil, barrel of oil, impacts directly, obviously, on transport. 80% of the oil that we import goes for transport. 20% goes for heating. Almost nothing goes for electricity. So it doesn't really have an impact on the electricity side, in fact, going up or down. And it has some impact on the heating side. But it's really on the transport side where the difference is very visible, and we can opportunistically benefit for that now, and perhaps longer term pay for it as the value changes.
Okay, Manuel, very briefly, once in a generation opportunity.
I agree with Marie on the issue of fossil fuel subsidies, and I must say that for once we agree on this. Okay. And on renewable, also, we can hope that in a few years, some of these technologies will become more and more mature and will be more reactive to market. And then that's what we can hope.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, well, I think also the Commission came out with some numbers a year and a half ago that fossil fuel and nuclear energy was heavily subsidized, twice as much as renewables. So if this is an opportunity to remove subsidies for fossil fuel energy, oil, it will be a good way to go. Because of course we all want, instead of using it on subsidies, we should use it on investment in R&D. That's really where we have to put the money.
Okay, Edgar, final word.
Yeah,
the economist also said that we should seize the opportunity to introduce a carbon tax or some form of carbon pricing. Of course, in the EU we have the ETS, and we should just start charging for the emissions allowances and introduce a floor to the allowance price. And I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our panelists, the audience, both the live studio audience and also the those people watching by webcast. And of course, thank you to GE for supporting today's conference. You are invited to stay and have a bite to eat and drink and continue the networking here. There is a private luncheon upstairs on the 8th floor for anyone with a red dot on their badge. So my colleagues will help show you the way upstairs. Finally, please watch out for the follow-up article that we will write on sciencebusiness.net relating to a number of the issues that were discussed today. But in the meantime, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you, very good.